In the spring of 1908, a railway surveyor working for the Union Pacific Railroad made a discovery that would haunt Las Vegas for over a century. While mapping potential expansion routes through the desert valley, just 3 years after the city's founding land auction, he stumbled upon what appeared to be a small, unmarked cemetery hidden behind a cluster of Joshua trees, approximately 4 miles southwest of the rapidly growing railroad town. What made this discovery truly disturbing wasn't the presence of graves in the harsh Nevada landscape. It was the meticulous arrangement of exactly 89 burial mounds, each precisely 6 feet apart, forming a perfect grid pattern that seemed to follow some inexplicable design. The surveyor's official report, sealed in Union Pacific Railroad archives until 1987, contained a single haunting observation. The soil composition suggests all burials occurred within a concentrated time frame, estimated between late 1905 and early 1908. Local residents, many of whom had arrived for the famous May 1905 land auction that established Las Vegas, claimed no knowledge of any cemetery in that location, and the newly formed territorial records showed no permits for such an extensive burial ground. For over 70 years, the railroad company quietly rerouted their tracks to avoid the site, and the few locals who knew of its existence spoke of it only in whispers, referring to it as Henderson's Harvest. What you're about to hear is the true story behind those 89 graves, a tale that began with the American dream of land ownership in a booming frontier town and ended with the most systematic killing spree in Nevada Territory's history. Before we continue with the story of the Henderson family and their dark secret, this channel isn't for everyone, only for the bravest souls who dare to uncover the mysteries that others fear to tell. If you're one of those rare individuals who seeks the truth behind America's darkest secrets, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what state or city you're listening from. We're building a community of true mystery seekers, and your story might be next. Now, let's discover what really happened in the desert outside the newly founded city of Las Vegas between 1905 and 1908. When Senator William Clark's famous land auction concluded on May 15, 1905, Las Vegas transformed overnight from a railroad water stop into a thriving frontier boomtown. The completion of the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad had created opportunities that drew thousands of hopeful settlers to the Nevada desert, each carrying dreams of prosperity in America's newest railroad city. Among the prospective buyers who missed the initial auction but arrived in its aftermath was Jeremiah Henderson, a 42-year-old former cattle rancher from Utah Territory who had lost everything in a series of harsh winters and failed investments. He reached Las Vegas in August 1905 with his wife Sarah, their 3 children, and exactly $63. Not enough to purchase prime city lots, but sufficient to establish a foothold in the growing community. The Henderson family initially settled on a homestead claim 6 miles southeast of the new city center, where Jeremiah established a way station providing supplies, meals, and shelter to the constant stream of travelers arriving by rail and wagon. Sarah, a devout Mormon woman with extensive knowledge of frontier medicine, quickly became known throughout the scattered community for her skill in treating everything from snake bites to fever. Their children, Mary, 15, Samuel, 12, and little Rebecca, 8, adapted to desert life while watching their family's circumstances gradually improve as Las Vegas grew around them. But Jeremiah harbored larger ambitions than running a simple way station. He had his eye on several choice lots near the railroad depot, properties that had sold for premium prices during the May auction and were now worth even more as the city expanded. The problem was clear. Established businessmen from Los Angeles and Salt Lake City controlled the most valuable real estate, and a struggling homesteader had little chance of competing with their resources. The Las Vegas of late 1905 was a rough, rapidly growing railroad town where fortunes could be made overnight and men reinvented themselves daily. The population swelled from the original auction buyers to include railroad workers, merchants, prospectors heading to the nearby mining districts, and the inevitable collection of gamblers, confidence men, and others seeking opportunities in a place where few questions were asked about a man's past. This influx of transient population created both opportunities and challenges for families like the Hendersons. The constant stream of travelers provided customers for their way station, but it also brought dangerous men carrying significant amounts of money through a region where law enforcement was sparse and territorial authority remained largely theoretical. Jeremiah understood that success in this environment required more than hard work and honest dealing. It required the kind of bold opportunism that had built many frontier fortunes, and he was prepared to embrace methods that might have seemed unthinkable in the settled communities he had left behind. The transformation of Jeremiah Henderson from struggling homesteader to something far more sinister began on a sweltering September morning in 1905, when a man calling himself Thomas Edwards arrived at their way station with an unusual request and a story that immediately aroused Jeremiah's interest. Edwards claimed to be a former railroad supervisor fleeing embezzlement charges in California. He carried a substantial roll of bills, quality gear, and the nervous demeanor of a man who understood that his freedom depended on his ability to disappear completely. More importantly, he had heard rumors that certain isolated homesteads in Nevada Territory provided services beyond simple food and shelter for travelers with particular needs. The conversation between Edwards and Jeremiah took place in the small cabin that served as their family's parlor, while Sarah prepared the evening meal and the children completed their daily chores. Edwards was direct about his situation. He needed to vanish entirely, with no possibility that his previous identity could ever be traced or discovered. He was willing to pay handsomely for such a service. "I've heard," Edwards said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that a man with money and the right connections can simply disappear out here, become someone else entirely. I'm prepared to pay $500 for that kind of assistance." $500 represented more money than the Henderson family had seen in the previous 2 years combined. For Jeremiah, who had been calculating daily how long their meager savings would last and whether they could survive another harsh desert winter, Edwards' offer presented both an opportunity and a test of his willingness to abandon conventional morality in pursuit of financial security. The solution that Jeremiah devised was both simple and monstrous. That night, while Edwards slept in the traveler's cabin, Jeremiah entered quietly and suffocated him with a pillow. The murder was carried out with methodical precision, ensuring that there were no signs of struggle and no evidence that would attract unwanted attention from any law enforcement officials who might eventually inquire about missing travelers. The disposal of Edwards' body established a pattern that would be repeated dozens of times over the following 3 years. Jeremiah buried the corpse in a carefully measured grave in the desert behind their homestead, marking the location with a small stone bearing only the number 1. Edwards' money, horses, and equipment were either used by the family or sold discreetly in Las Vegas, with Jeremiah claiming that his client had decided to continue his journey to California during the early morning hours. But the most significant aspect of Edwards' murder was not the crime itself, but Jeremiah's psychological response to it. Rather than experiencing guilt or revulsion, he found himself analyzing the operation for potential improvements in efficiency and security. He had discovered that he possessed both the emotional detachment and the practical skills necessary to solve his family's financial problems through systematic murder. The success of the Edwards operation convinced Jeremiah that he had found his calling. Within 2 weeks, he had begun quietly spreading word through Las Vegas's saloons and boarding houses that his homestead could provide special assistance to travelers who needed to start fresh in life. He was careful to target only men who were already fugitives from the law, reasoning that their disappearances would be less likely to attract investigation. Samuel Henderson, who had always been an observant child, began to notice changes in his father's behavior and their family's circumstances that he couldn't fully understand, but found deeply troubling. The boy had seen Edwards arrive at their homestead, had shared meals with him, and had even helped him care for his horses. When his father explained that Edwards had departed before dawn, Samuel's questions about the man's abandoned possessions were dismissed with harsh warnings about the importance of minding his own business. As autumn arrived in the Nevada desert in 1905, the Henderson family's circumstances began to change in ways that reflected both the growth of Las Vegas as a boomtown and Jeremiah's increasing sophistication as a predator. The completion of the railroad connection had brought unprecedented prosperity to the region, and the Henderson Way Station benefited from the constant stream of travelers, railroad workers, and entrepreneurs passing through the area. But beneath the surface of this apparent legitimate success, Jeremiah had begun to systematically develop what he privately called his disappearing service. The murder of Thomas Edwards had been followed by 3 more carefully planned killings before the end of 1905, each targeting men who had approached him seeking assistance in escaping their criminal pasts. Jeremiah's victims during this period included a former cavalry deserter carrying stolen army payroll money, a confidence man fleeing fraud charges in Colorado, and a cattle rustler wanted for murder in Arizona territory. Each man had been drawn to the Henderson homestead by carefully planted rumors about a place where desperate men could find help in starting new lives with new identities. The selection process was methodical and cruel. Jeremiah would engage potential clients in detailed conversations about their circumstances, evaluating both their financial resources and the likelihood that their disappearances would attract law enforcement attention. Men with substantial money but few personal connections were ideal targets, while those with family members or business partners who might investigate their disappearances were politely turned away. Sarah Henderson's role in these crimes was complex and tragic. While she was not initially aware of her husband's activities, she had begun to notice inconsistencies in his explanations for their improved financial circumstances and the regular appearance and disappearance of travelers at their homestead. Her suspicions were aroused further by changes in Jeremiah's personality and behavior that seemed to reflect a growing callousness toward human life. The breaking point came in December 1905. When Sarah discovered her husband's journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard in their bedroom. The leather-bound book contained detailed records of 7 murders, including descriptions of the victims, estimates of their financial resources, and precise locations of their burial sites. Most chilling of all were Jeremiah's clinical observations about improving his methods and expanding his operation. The confrontation between Sarah and Jeremiah that followed this discovery revealed the full extent of his moral corruption and his plans for their family's future. Rather than expressing remorse or agreeing to stop the killings, Jeremiah explained his actions with the cold logic of a businessman pursuing a profitable enterprise. "These men are already dead," he told his wife, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. "They've committed crimes that have put them beyond redemption, and they can never return to the lives they had before. What I'm offering them is peace, permanent peace. And what they're offering me is the means to secure our family's future in this new city." Jeremiah's vision extended far beyond simply accumulating money through murder. He had been studying Las Vegas's rapid growth and had identified specific properties near the railroad depot that he believed would make his family wealthy as the city continued to expand. His calculations indicated that he would need to complete approximately 89 successful operations to generate sufficient funds to purchase these properties and establish himself as a legitimate businessman. Sarah's response to these revelations was shaped by both horror at her husband's crimes and terror for her family's safety. She understood that Jeremiah had become something monstrous, but she also understood that any attempt to expose him would likely result in her own death and the destruction of her children. The knowledge that she was married to a serial killer was almost unbearable, but the knowledge that she was now complicit in his crimes was even worse. The psychological pressure on the Henderson family intensified dramatically as Jeremiah's operation